All right, so last night we were looking at this story, and Compound, which is one of the most prominent DeFi platforms in the world, had a bit of an issue. Something with its comptroller contract went wrong, and all of a sudden, comp tokens were flowing out in ways that they shouldn't have been flowing out. People were claiming $27 million worth of comp tokens in one transaction that we saw last night, and Compound founder Robert Leshner said, "Hey, yeah, there's like $80 million at risk here. And also, we have to go through a 7-day governance process to figure this out." So this is DeFi in action, the experimental world of DeFi, and we get to see the latest mix-up. I'm going to toss this to Will. Compound has really avoided, I think, high-profile flubs in the past 18 months or so. So this one was striking. But what was your initial thought when you saw this one?
Yeah, exactly what you're saying right there. Compound is one of those blue chip DeFi markets out there that hasn't had any issues to date, but it makes sense it's having issues now. And the reason for that is it's fully transferred the power of governance and implementation of new code into its community hands. Beforehand, it was very much so in the hands of Compound Labs, which is more of a professional team kind of developing that code, pushing that into production, pushing it forward so people can take out loans in a peer-to-peer fashion. Now it's in the community's hands. And as we're seeing, decentralized governments gets pretty messy. So what happened here is that the controller in this governance system broke. There was literally 2 lines of code that were incorrect. And someone noticed it a few weeks ago, tried to get a patch implemented, but just because of the governance structure, it didn't get noticed, didn't get pushed forward. And so a new proposal went into production that shouldn't have gone into production and allowed for people to take out comp tokens, which is the governance token for the whole system, without having to go through the proper process for doing so. So it's notable to see that we have this new DeFi ecosystem that is going to go through multiple maturation systems or multiple maturation. I can't figure out the word right now, but just going to go through a lot of processes. Yeah, I'm struggling right now, but it's going to keep going through these things. And it's not just about the first iteration, right? Compound Labs put out a great product, gave up tons of loans over the years or over the months, no issues. Goes to a decentralized governance system, it's going to have problems. Last thing I would say, though, it is interesting to look at this from they have 7 days to figure this out and kind of create a patch before it goes into production. And people can be stealing money, I guess, kind of depends on how you view the whole problem. It's very similar to the DAO hack in 2016, where there was a 30-day window where they had to figure out what to do with the whole issue. They decided to roll back the whole Ethereum blockchain at the time. Can't really do that on Compound because it's a layer 2 dApp. So you can't really do anything on that front. But you do have this open period where money is just going to be stolen. And there's not a lot you can do except for lobby people not to take money out of the system. But Naomi, going to throw it to you.
Yeah, I think their governance system is really interesting. About a year ago, I interviewed Robert Leshner, and he was chatting about this move towards a more decentralized process. And it was all wrapped in this idea that this is beneficial to everyone. This is the path forward. I agreed with him. Decentralization is better. If you can take that control out of the hands of developers, give it to a decentralized community. I love that ethos. I think we're increasingly moving in that direction. And I want to see more of that. The decentralization of control. And then situations like this come up and you're like, oh, it's a trade-off. It's definitely a trade-off. The fact that they have a 1-week process, that's really interesting. And a lot of platforms have that, this idea that it takes a while for things to be vetted and go through and implemented. And I mean, there are some platforms that kind of have this hybrid model where you have this governance process, but there is a capacity for teams to overrule it. Again, it's such a trade-off, and it really needs to be analyzed, because if you can overrule it in a case like this bug, you save a platform and save all of this money from getting stolen. But if you have the ability to overrule something, it's not decentralized at all. It's kind of just lip service to decentralization. So, I mean, as you said, Will, this industry needs a lot of maturation. They need to figure out how to handle things like this. Maybe there needs to be a longer vetting process before things get put in. Maybe there needs to be a system for prioritizing or creating a hierarchy of bugs and things to be pushed so that they don't go unnoticed. If a patch was suggested and it was just ignored, well, there's definitely something wrong with the way that system is running right now. So it'll be interesting to see how they figure that, how they change things. The only way to change things now is to go through the governance process, the 1-week process, get feedback from the community, try and get a majority to put whatever change they want through. So it'll be up to the community to kind of form a consensus around what a good path forward is. And when you have groups deciding on what the best path forward is, it often doesn't lead to the best outcome. Sometimes it's just the lowest common denominator. What's the thing that we can get everyone to agree on? So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. But yeah, I really like Compound. It's sad to see a bug like this, which is pretty catastrophic. But Danny, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, or this is just a reminder that, or Zach, Zach, take it from here.
You go first, Danny.
Danny, you got it.
Oh, I don't know. I'm just thinking this is just a reminder that governance is messy, and when you have this distributed system for making decisions, it's you almost still need someone to be held accountable, or at least to understand that, like, all right, we need to have a triage mechanism in place. So if we know that there's some issue coming down the pipeline, we are able to act ahead of time to fix it. I hadn't realized that this was an issue that had been flagged in the days running up to it. And so, this is going to be this is a pretty stark example of the importance of accountability. I'm not quite sure how you enforce accountability when you have a governance model that is, in some respects, the opposite of that. But it is an important thing to keep in mind for a Compound and for really all projects.
Yeah, just to
I
jump
just have
in
a
there
question for you. Sorry, go ahead, Will.
Yeah, really quick. I'd say that the responsibility, it moves away from the founders and the people who implemented the project and moves on to the token holders, because they get punished in the price. So that's why this whole DAO experiment very much so depends on tokens. If you don't have people who are responsive to price movements, then you're not going to have DAO inputs. You're not going to have people working within DAOs to figure things out. So you really have to have those two correlations tight together. And I think we'll see more of that over the next few years as DAOs and tokens become bigger things. Amy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to know, is there a place for a white hat hacker to come in and save the day with this? Like, is there a fixed amount of Compound token that can be stolen? Or is this just an infinite thing that can keep happening? Because, I mean, if there's a fixed amount, it makes sense that someone would come in, take it all, say, fix the system, and then I'll give it all back. But instead, the fact that they're relying on appealing to the community and saying, please don't steal our stuff, that seems like it's a disaster. So am I like understanding it correctly that there is no fixed cap and no capacity for this? Zach, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, Leshner said last night that it only will affect something like 280,000 comp tokens. So there is like a window. That's a big amount of money. That's a very large amount of money. It's worth noting that this is a platform that has $10 billion in crypto assets committed to it. So this is not a bank breaking amount of money. If we're talking about $80 million, probably less now that the price of comp is tanking. Well, not tanking, but is sinking. It may not break the bank here, but it's interesting to see these things get worked out in real time. And I think Will's point is very apt, right? This is a voter turnout issue, right? This is a governance. This is like voter participation. We call these things governance tokens, but for most people, they are tokens that retain value and can be spun into other value, whether you want that in fiat or some other token. So just because you have the governance token doesn't mean that you're participating in governance, like many people in many governance systems in the traditional world as well. So hopefully we'll see a way to incentivize people to actually use their tokens for good and cast their vote to get these fixes resolved. But I'll toss it back to Naomi for a last thought.
Yeah, I just have real quick final words about that point, Zach. Governance. It's so hard just to get people to turn out for voting in our traditional political system. You think that they're going to turn out for voting for the 100 tokens that they hold? Because we're always talking about having a seat at the table and how important it is for us to have a say and contribute to this system. And it's like, you know what? I disagree. People don't care. People don't want to spend their lives wondering what proposals are being put through. You have a tiny fraction of people who are keeping an eye on this stuff, who are benefiting or who are moving projects in a certain direction. But most people are living their lives and they have full-time jobs and they don't even have time to go to the post office, and pick up something in their lockbox. I'm not even speaking for a personal experience, or maybe I am, but like this stuff is just like the idea that we want to have control sounds good in theory, and in practice, no, people don't actually want to have control over the governance of this stuff. They just want something that's easy, and they're probably looking at it to make money. But Zach, I'll throw it back to you.
Well, the flip side is the system that we have now, where these decisions are actually governed by big holders, whales, early investors, and people on the team, and you end up with a bit of decentralization theater. So hopefully that nut can get cracked in a way that's meaningful for these systems as they grow.